March 7, 1919. Oak Park, Illinois. Ernest Hemingway, 19 years old, holds a letter in his hands. His hands are shaking so badly that the paper trembles like a leaf in the wind. He reads the same sentence for the third time. I am and always will be too old. I can't escape the fact that you're just a boy. The letter is from Agnes von Kurowski, the Red Cross nurse who cared for him in Italy. The woman who promised to marry him. The woman who just destroyed his heart. More than 900 love letters were written during World War I between soldiers and nurses on the front lines. This is the story of one of them, and the price they paid for loving amid chaos. Subscribe now because this is one of the most devastating love stories the war ever produced. And hit the bell because in the coming weeks we're going to tell more forgotten stories you need to know. But to understand how we got to this heartbroken moment in Oak Park, you need to go back 8 months in time. July 15, 1918. American Red Cross Hospital, Milan, Italy. The ambulance stops in front of the hospital with a sharp brake. Red dust rises from the cobblestone street. The driver jumps out, opens the back doors and shouts, "Mortar and machine gun wounds, shredded legs." Agnes von Kurowski is finishing her 16-hour shift when she hears the commotion. She's 26 years old, with dark brown hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that have seen too much in the last 6 weeks in Italy. Her mother once described her as too radiant for an ordinary life. That's why Agnes abandoned her boring job at the Washington Public Library and enlisted in the Red Cross. The smell of blood and disinfectant permeates the hallway as she approaches the stretcher. The wounded soldier has his face covered in mud and dried blood, but when he opens his eyes, bright brown eyes, almost feverish with adrenaline, he smiles. "Hello, nurse. Do you have cigarettes?" Agnes looks at his legs. Both are bandaged from ankle to thigh. There are fresh blood stains running through the dressings. According to the report the doctor just handed over, they removed more than 200 metal fragments from his legs. 10 wounds are serious enough to kill him if they get infected. "I shouldn't be smoking," she responds, but there's a trace of a smile at the corner of her mouth. "What's your name?" "Ernest Hemingway, from Oak Park. And you?" "Agnes, but here they call me Miss von Kurowski." "Von Kurowski? That's German?" "My father was German, but he was born an aristocrat, if that helps." Ernest gives a hoarse laugh, then grimaces in pain. A German aristocrat taking care of a Midwestern American boy. War does strange things, doesn't it? Agnes doesn't know it yet, but this is the moment. The moment when her life changes forever. Ernest arrived in Italy just 5 weeks earlier. He volunteered as an ambulance driver after being rejected by the American Army because of poor eyesight. But 5 weeks were enough to see him drive on potholed roads under artillery fire, carry mangled bodies, and finally, on July 8th at 2 a.m, be hit by an Austrian mortar while distributing chocolate and cigarettes to Italian soldiers at Fossalta di Piave. He was less than 20 meters from the front line when the explosion threw him backwards. When he regained consciousness, there were 2 dead Italian soldiers beside him. A third was moaning, his legs shattered. Ernest, with his own legs in tatters, dragged the man to an aid station. He only passed out when they arrived. Now 10 days later, he's in Milan, alive, but marked forever. During the first 2 weeks, Agnes treats Ernest like any other patient. She changes his dressings twice a day, cleans his wounds with alcohol, ignoring his groans of pain, checks his temperature, records his statistics on the chart. But Ernest isn't like the other soldiers. He talks a lot. He tells stories about Oak Park, about fishing in Michigan, about his doctor father who taught him to hunt. He makes jokes even when he has a fever. When Agnes enters the room at 6 a.m, he's already awake, smiling. "Good morning, Miss von Kurowski. I dreamed about you." "I'm sure you did," she responds, but she can't hide her smile. The other nurses begin to notice. Elsie MacDonald, Agnes's friend, pulls her aside one afternoon. "You need to be careful with Hemingway." "Why?" "He's in love with you. Anyone with eyes can see it." Agnes shakes her head. "He's just a boy." "He's 19, Elsie. A boy with war wounds and far from home." It's exactly the kind of situation where hearts get broken. But Agnes can't keep her distance, not completely. August 15, 1918. Agnes is with Ernest in his room reading aloud. It's night. The window is open and a warm breeze brings the scent of jasmine from the hospital garden. Ernest is lying in bed watching her. "Why did you come here?" he suddenly asks. Agnes closes the book. "To Italy?" "To the war. You could be in Washington, safe, comfortable." She thinks for a moment. Because the library was too slow. Because I wanted something that mattered, and maybe, she hesitates, maybe because I wanted to feel something real. Ernest leans forward, ignoring the pain the movement causes. And are you feeling it? Their eyes meet, and Agnes realizes she's crossed a line she shouldn't have crossed. In her diary that night, she writes just 3 words, "This is dangerous," but she doesn't stop visiting him. September 1918. Ernest is discharged from the hospital but remains in Milan for outpatient treatment. Agnes and he begin to meet outside the hospital. They walk through the parks. They dine in small restaurants where no one knows them. She takes him to see the Milan Cathedral at sunset. And at some point, neither could say exactly when, the line between nurse and patient, between friendship and love, disappears completely. "I love you," Ernest says one night, holding her hand under a cafe table. Agnes should pull back, should remind him that she's 26 and he's only 19, that she can't have anything serious with a patient, that it's against the rules, but instead she squeezes his hand back. "I love you too," she whispers. That night she stops writing in her diary, because now there are secrets that can't be recorded, things that could cost her job, her reputation. Instead, she begins to write letters. Letters to Ernest when they're apart. Letters where she can say everything she can't say out loud. October 15, 1918. Florence, Italy. Agnes has been temporarily transferred to another hospital. It's only for 3 weeks, but it feels like an eternity. She sends the first letter to Ernest through the American Officers Club, not to the hospital. She can't risk someone finding out. "My dear boy, you can't imagine how hard it is to be away. Every wounded person I treat, I see your face. Every groan of pain reminds me of those first nights when you arrived, so brave even with those shattered legs. I promised myself I wouldn't let this happen. But it happened, and now I don't know if I have the strength to go back. You asked me yesterday if I'll marry you when the war is over. I should have said no. I should have been sensible. But my heart doesn't know how to be sensible when it comes to you. I'll be back in Milan in 2 weeks. Wait for me. With all my love, Agnes. P.S. Burn this letter after reading." Ernest doesn't burn the letter. He doesn't burn any of them. Over the next 4 months, Agnes writes 52 letters to Ernest. Some are long, pages and pages of confessions and dreams. Others are brief, just a few lines scribbled between shifts. She talks about the future, about the house they'll have, about the places they'll visit when the war ends, about how they'll have a normal life away from the blood and death. Ernest writes less, but when he writes, his words are intense, almost desperate. "Agnes, you're the only real thing in this shitty world. Everything else is mud and blood and screaming men. But when I think of you, I can breathe again. I know you think I'm too young. But I've grown more in the last 6 months than in all 19 years before that. I've seen men die. I've seen things I'll carry forever, but I also saw you, and that makes it all worthwhile. I love you more than words can say. Yours forever, Ernest." November 11th, 1918. The armistice is signed. The war is over. Agnes is in Treviso when she hears the news. The Italian soldiers are celebrating in the streets. Wine bottles appear from everywhere. There's music, dancing, embraces between strangers. But Agnes feels only a tightness in her chest. Because the war ending means she'll soon have to make a decision. They see each other only a few more times before Ernest embarks back home in January 1919. Each meeting is charged with unspoken tension. Ernest talks about marriage as if it were a done deal. Agnes smiles, agrees, but there's something in the depths of her eyes that he can't decipher. The night before he leaves, they meet one last time in a small hotel near the station. "You'll wait for me, won't you?" Ernest asks, holding her face in his hands. "I'll work, save money. In 6 months I'll come back for you." "Of course," Agnes responds, and in that moment she believes it. But after he leaves, doubt sets in. January 1919. Treviso, Italy. Agnes continues in Italy after the armistice. There's still so much work to do. So many wounded who need care. So many soldiers who will never fully recover. And there are other men too. An Italian lieutenant named Domenico Caracciolo invites her to dinner. He's charming, sophisticated, closer to her age. He doesn't look at her with the hungry, desperate eyes of a 19-year-old boy. He treats her like a woman, not like a savior. Agnes accepts the invitation. She shouldn't, she promised Ernest. But Ernest is an ocean away, and Domenico is here now, smiling at her under the chandelier of a Florentine restaurant. Ernest's letters keep coming. He writes about Oak Park, about how the town seems smaller now, about how his parents ask about her, about the plans he's making. Agnes, today I went to the bank and opened a savings account. For us, for our house. My mother is already asking questions. When are you coming? When are we getting married? I say soon, because it has to be soon. I can't stay away from you much longer. You're everything to me. You know that, don't you? Eternally yours, Ernest. Agnes reads the letter 3 times. Then she folds it and puts it in a drawer with all the others. She doesn't respond immediately. If you're finding it hard to believe where this story is going, leave your like now. Because what happens in the next few months will break your heart. And it's all real. February 1919. Domenico asks Agnes to marry him. She's stunned, confused. Part of her wants to say yes. Part of her still hears Ernest's voice in her head. You'll wait for me, won't you? She needs to make a decision. And in the early morning of March 7th, sitting at the table in her room with a single candle lit, Agnes von Kurowski writes the most difficult letter of her life. Dear Ernest, I don't know how to begin this letter. I spent the whole night rehearsing the words in my head, but none of them seem right. I need to be honest with you. And with myself. I've fallen in love with someone else, an Italian lieutenant. He asked me to marry him, and I accepted. I know this will hurt you deeply, and I hate myself for causing this pain. But it would be more cruel to give you false hope when my heart is no longer with you. The truth, Ernest, is that I should never have let this go so far. You're 19 years old. I'm 26. When we met, you were a wounded boy far from home, and I was the nurse taking care of you. It was too easy to confuse gratitude with love, comfort with passion. I am and always will be too old for you. I can't escape the fact that you're just a boy and a kid. You have a whole life ahead of you. You'll meet someone who loves you the way you deserve. Someone your age. Someone who can grow with you instead of trying to mold you. Please don't hate me. Keep the good memories we shared. They were real even if they weren't enough. With sincere affection, Agnes. P.S. I destroyed all your letters, as you should destroy mine. It's better this way. Agnes seals the envelope. She writes his address in Oak Park with hands that tremble less than they should. The next morning she delivers the letter to the military mail, and then she waits. March 25, 1919. Oak Park, Illinois. Ernest receives the letter. He reads it once, then again. Then a third time, as if the words could change if he looked long enough. They don't change. He doesn't cry. Not immediately. Instead, he leaves the house and walks. He walks to the forest where he used to hunt with his father. He walks until his legs, and still weak from the wounds, give out. And then, alone among the trees, he lets his heart break. In the following months, Ernest tries to work, tries to write, tries to forget. But Agnes is in everything. In the way the morning light comes through the window, in the smell of disinfectant, in the sound of rain hitting the roof. He begins to write a story, then another. Then another, all about the war, all about lost love, all about a nurse. He doesn't use her name. He calls her Ag first, then Luce. Then years later, Catherine Barclay. But it's always Agnes. Always the woman who saved his life and then broke his heart. Key West, Florida. Ernest Hemingway, now 30 years old and a famous writer, finishes his second novel. The title is A Farewell to Arms. It's the story of an American soldier wounded in Italy who falls in love with a British nurse. It's the story of love amid war, of promises made in hospital rooms, of letters exchanged between shifts. It's his and Agnes's story, but with a different ending. In the book, the nurse doesn't abandon the soldier. Instead, she dies in childbirth, and the soldier is left alone, walking back to the hotel in the rain. Ernest gives Agnes the ending that somewhere deep in his wounded heart he wished had happened. Because being left felt worse than death, the book becomes a bestseller. It's acclaimed as a masterpiece. The love story between Frederick Henry and Catherine Barclay becomes iconic. But few know that Catherine is real. That the letters in the book are echoes of real letters. That the pain on the pages is the pain of a 19-year-old boy who loved someone who couldn't love him back. December 22, 1922. 3 years after the farewell letter, Agnes writes to Ernest one last time. It's a short letter, almost casual. She congratulates him on his marriage. Says she's proud of him. Asks him to write back occasionally. Ernest doesn't respond. They never speak again. The following years, Agnes never marries Domenico Caracciolo. The engagement ends in less than a year. She returns to the United States, works in Haiti as a nurse, marries twice, neither time to Domenico, and eventually settles in Key West, ironically the same city where Hemingway lived. They never meet there. The city is small, but they never cross paths. When Ernest's brother Lester interviews her in 1961 for a book about Hemingway, Agnes insists that their relationship was just a flirtation, that she only liked him, that he was immature, sarcastic, impulsive. She resents the comparison to Catherine Barclay, says she was never Hemingway's lover, as the book suggests. "I wasn't that kind of girl," she declares. But she kept the 52 letters she wrote to him, the same letters she said she destroyed. And when Lester shows her old photos, her eyes fill with tears. July 2, 1961, Ketchum, Idaho. Ernest Hemingway, at 61 years old, commits suicide with a shotgun. When the news reaches Agnes, now 69 and working as a librarian in Key West, she closes her office door and cries. She never publicly says what she felt that day. But in her diary, yes, she went back to keeping a diary, she writes just one line: "I should have chosen differently." Key West, Florida. Agnes von Karofsky dies at 92 years old. She's buried in Washington, D.C., at Rock Creek Cemetery, under a simple headstone that says only, Agnes H. von Karofsky Stanfield, 1892-1984. There's no mention of Ernest Hemingway. But in a trunk in her house, her heirs find something: copies of all 52 letters she wrote to Ernest during the war. She said she destroyed them, but she couldn't, because some love stories, no matter how brief or broken, are never really forgotten. More than 900 love letters were written between soldiers and nurses during World War I. Most were never published. Most were destroyed, as they should have been. But the letters between Agnes and Ernest survived. And through them we can see not just a love story, but the brutal truth about war. That it doesn't just destroy bodies. It breaks hearts. It makes love impossible. It forces choices that no one should have to make. Agnes wasn't a villain. Ernest wasn't just a victim. They were two people trying to find something real in a world that was falling apart around them. And perhaps in the end it was best that it ended the way it did. Because as Ernest wrote years later in another story, the best love story is one that doesn't have a happy ending. Because a happy ending means the story is over. And some stories are too strong to end. If this story impacted you, leave your comment saying, would you have made the same choice as Agnes? Or would you have risked everything for love? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because in the coming weeks we're going to tell more forgotten stories from World War II. Stories of love, courage, and sacrifice that you need to know. And share this video. Stories like this can't be forgotten, because in the end war may end. But love and the pain of lost love lasts forever. April 9, 1942. Hospital number 2, Bataan, Philippines. 77 American nurses have just received the most terrifying order of their lives. Destroy all medical supplies. Burn the records. The Japanese are coming, and there's no evacuation planned for them. In the coming hours, these women will make decisions that transform them from nurses into prisoners of war. And what they'll face over the next 3.5 years goes far beyond anything any military training could prepare them for. Subscribe now, because this is one of the most brutal and heroic stories you've never heard. And hit the bell so you don't miss the next episodes in this series. Lieutenant Josie Nesbitt presses the stethoscope to a soldier's chest. He's 19 years old. His left lung is punctured by mortar shrapnel. She knows he won't survive the night, but she keeps checking his vital signs because that's what nurses do. It's what keeps her sane.